una plática de los republicanos y sacaron un comunicado. Eso es de una reunión de Zoom. Yo estuve ahí de invitado, porque Roger Stone me consiguió la reunión. Y es importante que en Israel hablar con los amigos para que nos apoyen en el tema de logística, de inteligencia y otros temas que son muy necesarios para mi regreso. Hay que abrir un poco los ojos, la situación global no está tan bien. El primer ministro de Israel nos va a dar el apoyo. Nosotros estamos muy agradecidos con él. Tuvieron mucho que ver ellos. Tuvieron todo que ver, de hecho, ellos con mi salida y negociación. Habíamos hablado. Yo había mandado un recado de que íbamos a ganar y que se me apoyara a mí en estos momentos. La presidencia tiene que regresar a las manos correctas y el presidente Donald Trump es lo que quiere él. Si van a ir contra él, yo lo comunico inmediatamente.
You know, and it's not Israel's involvement with drug traffickers goes back quite a ways. Mm-hmm. There was, you know, back in, 22 years ago, out of Guatemala, they were smuggling weapons that went through Panama that wound up with the Autodefensas, the AUC, the Autodefensa Colombiano, which is this extremist right-wing group that was involved with drug trafficking. They supplanted one of I think the Cali cartel. So Israel's been involved with that. In fact, I know the little Jewish guy that was involved with transiting the weapons. He got banned, had his visa pulled, was then banned from coming to the United States. And I'd first met him when we were investigating cigarette smuggling and contraband, and he was the Philip Morris authorized distributor of all things. So this connection that goes throughout Central South America, it's family based, it's tied into international corporations, and you know the Israelis through Mossad have had a very big hand in Guatemala, Salvador, Honduras, and back when, you know, in the bad old days when they were supporting the authoritarian governments and the ones who were engaged in killing a lot of the natives, particularly in Guatemala, killing the Indians. So yeah, this doesn't surprise me. What's interesting is the connection with Malay. So that again, I'm assuming. I didn't confirm it personally that Malay, though, is Jewish. And yeah, so this, let's call it the Zionist connection, because what's fascinating is running throughout Central and South America, you also have a Lebanese diaspora. Mm-hmm. And you've got family networks that run, and they're centered in the commercial centers. So in the Colón Free Trade Zone, in Maicao, Colombia, it's the major smuggling port into Colombia that feeds what are called these black market areas within, like Bogota and Medellin. Then it extends, again, these are family networks that extend down into the Ciudad del Este in Paraguay that's on the border with Brazil, and then the other major free trade zone, Iquique. So you've got side by side, most of these family networks are Sunni, not Shia, but they are some Shia. And so you got this sort of this, if you will, the Israeli Palestinian conflict carried out in the shadows down there.
Well, I was also interested in asking about this weird Roger Stone connection. I was browsing for this when I first heard the word Honduras, Kate, and I pulled up this tweet and I said, what the hell is Roger Stone trying to free the Honduran president for? What the hell is going on here? So I started digging into that, but that's not even it. He wrote him a whole article based on his Substack about saving this Prospera project. A well-timed pardon of former President Hernandez would be the final death blow to Castro with national elections set to take place later this year. Castro's regime could be upended and Honduras liberated without firing a single shot or deploying a single troop etc. That entire article goes and sings the praises of Prospera, which we'll get into in a little bit more detail. But what do you know about Roger Stone and his connections to Latin America?
Well, I really nothing other than what I know indirectly through John Kiriakou. So remember when John Kiriakou was trying to get a pardon?
He still is. Yeah. Guys, go to our Substack and help us free John Kiriakou. We'll get into more detail about this later, but there you go.
and you recall the story of how Rudy Giuliani helped him out?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Rudy Giuliani just needed a couple of $1 million. So I guarantee, I wonder how Mr. Juan Orlando Hernandez consiguió su pardon. How did he get his pardon? Mm-hmm. Any chance that $1 million or more might have changed hands? one has, because Trump, as it turns out, Trump is like, he is a quintessential Latin American president in terms of corruption and the family corruption that we're now witnessing on just a massive scale. So yeah, Hernandez, I'm sure he was able to buy his way out, and the payment went to Stone. Who knows?
Yeah, but that's probably close to the truth of what happened, I would think.
Yeah, money talks, and even like there is one of the major families, big players in Panama, on the Arab Muslim side of the house is the Wakeds, Abdul Waked, his son Nidal Waked, and they were convicted in money laundering, cocaine trafficking, etc. But they got out of jail pretty quick. And Nidal was held in prison up here in the States. He got out after like 6 months, hardly spent any time. And it's just like, if you or I get busted on that, you're looking at some hard time and you don't get off. These other guys, as long as you got some money, you can usually buy your way out. Look, I've been to, that's Roatan. So, great diving. We were there, my wife and another nurse that traveled with us. We were there in 1978, July of 78. And thought we could just show up out there on the island and get find a room. No, it's difficult. We ended up, this one hotel had mercy on us. And so they had like this guest house but there were no beds, no furniture. So we slept on the floor and learned the hard way that if you go out and you snorkel all day and you're a gringo, you find out you get blistered with the sun. Oh my God. So trying to sleep on a wood floor with ponchos. And then the worst part of it was to flush the toilet. We had to take a bucket with a string and go out and drop the bucket in the well, pull it up, come in, you'd pour the bucket in. And so in the middle of the night, some of us had what we call intestinal difficulties. Went out, dropped the bucket down the well, the string broke.
Oh no!
Oh, so yeah, so Roatan is not what you'd call one of the great places for massive internet. Hong Kong. The word that comes to mind is you got to be shitting me.
Oh my God.
Okay, it was. I mean, and one last story about Roatan. We'd gotten out. We had made zero planning. So I was 23 at the time. So what did I know? Sort of zero planning. So we tried to figure out how are we going to get back to the mainland Honduras, and we went up to this. It's called Anthony's Key. It's a resort up there towards the left. If you look at that picture, the left side of Roatan, and there's another gringo. There's a guy and his wife and daughter, and he overheard us talking. He says, "Hey, I can give you a ride back." Well, it turns out he's a pilot, and so he says, "Hey, I'm gonna fly over the Anthony Keys and wave my wings at my wife and daughter." He did that, and the engine started cutting out, and he starts hitting the dashboard. And I thought I checked this fuel here. Found out. So this was 1978. 7 years later, when I'm at CIA, this guy was a CIA pilot. Who knew?
Oh no.
Honduras.
Yeah, so that's what Palmarola is the base. That's where the U.S. Military's had a base there. Good God, 40 years, 41, 42 years. So it's located halfway between sort of Tegucigalpa in the south and San Pedro Sula in the north, and about another hour south of Lake Yohoa. So if you look at a map of Honduras, right in the middle is this big ass lake. Used to be tremendous bass fishing. It's been fished out, but south of that is Palmarola. So am I understanding that the ZEDES is basically a free trade zone? Is that what they're talking about building?
Yes.
And then they'll get a base to protect it.
Yeah. So this looks like some classic money laundering operation on some grand scale.
Yeah.
Because you already you have the Colon Free Trade Zone. So the Colon Free Trade Zone from Honduras is about 400 miles south, and it sits at the north end of the Panama Canal. If people don't realize, you think Panama Canal runs east to west. It runs north to south. And so the Colon Free Trade Zone was at one point the second largest free trade zone in the world. It was second only to Hong Kong. Now I think it's fallen off somewhat, but until 28 February, the second largest, I believe, was Jebel Ali in the United Arab Emirates. But in light of that war, they're not doing too much activity there anymore. So, but it begs the question: why a free trade zone there? I mean, it's not like it's at some crucial location. It's off the coast of Honduras. Honduras has always been a backwater. And you've got the Colon Free Trade Zone. You got the Mexican port Veracruz. Yes, it's just because let's put any free trade zone there. Okay, the ships are going to have to come to unload products, and what products are you going to sell? Household electronics like rice cookers, coffee makers, irons. Are you going to sell maybe to Samsung televisions, whatever? Okay, that all comes from Asia. And to get there, they have to sail through the Panama Canal, which is why when ships come through the Panama Canal, right there at the north end of it, there's this entire city, Colon, which is it's nothing but just a mass of shops, retail, wholesale items, every product in the world you can imagine. So they're doing this off the coast of Honduras. It makes no sense. And the infrastructure, just the infrastructure there alone, like you got a lot of people that work in the Colon Free Trade Zone. Where the hell are they going to get all these people? Roatan's not a big ass island. It's a relatively small island. And then, are you going to, the people that come and staff the free trade zones, the different offices? So something smells about this.
Oh, wait. They're also building a center for the confinement of terrorism in Tegucigalpa, modeled on CCOT.
Tegucigalpa, have you ever flown in there by chance?
No.
Okay. So the approach to the runway is down. You got a mountain slope like this, so the plane's flying down the slope of the mountain. Little kids will stand there and throw rocks at airplanes. They have hit airplanes with rocks from the ground. I kid you not.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So Tegucigalpa, a terrorism holding cell. Yeah, that's what we need.
Yo estoy feliz con el simple hecho de que me hayan contestado. Ahora bien, mi respuesta formal es esta. Yo no voy a apoyar, pero ni un poquito, lo que han dicho sobre mí, ni lo que me han ofrecido. Yo voy a empezar fuertemente a acusar con nombre y apellido a los que están truncándome todo mi proceso de regreso a Honduras. También les conseguí el contacto de las petroleras, les conseguí el contacto de las empresas, les conseguí todo. Y a mí no me están resolviendo, pero ni una pista de toda la situación que yo pedí. el dinero del indulto ni queda luz usted, ni queda luz usted. Salió de una junta de rabinos y de una gente que apoyaba a Israel.
Hey,
Ah.
you know, a blessing on your house, Mazel Tov, Mazel Tov.
Very good reference. I love it, Larry.
Yeah.
I love it.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So we're dealing with heavy. And what do you know of any of Juan Hernandez's connections to Israel or
Well, all I recall is just that from early on, Honduras was seen sort of as a reliable UN vote for Israel.
Israel. Yeah.
Within the politics, you know, I never, and I'm thinking back to '86. So I was the Honduran Lance from '86 through '89. I don't recall it back then with seeing much Israeli influence. There, you know, Honduras at that point was it was like the land-based aircraft carrier for the CIA, because the CIA was running operations against the Sandinistas from bases in Honduras, in the southern part, as well as from Swan Island. And then, you know, it was that was back when Honduras was one of the top four foreign policy priorities of the U.S. government. That time, President Reagan. So, you know, they had tremendous access, a lot of money flowing through there.
Alinear a todas las iglesias para que nos apoyen. Las iglesias son las que nos van a encargar de que la gente le olvide el pasado y que piensen que fue la izquierda que hizo eso. Si hay que matar a la gente para nosotros poder estar tranquilos, se va a hacer. Si hay que regresar a la represión para controlar el país, se va a hacer. Hay que hacer todo lo que tengamos en las manos posibles para no volver a soltar el poder. Y hay que hacerle ver que todo lo que va a pasar, muertes, asesinatos, secuestros, vienen por parte de los comunistas. Honduras necesita fuerza, necesita logística, necesita sangre. Si vos querés tener a la gente controlada, necesita oprimirla, exprimirla, contrarrestar la violencia, generando violencia. Es que es lo que el presidente Trump diga. Y vos hacete cuenta caso que él va a estar ahí toda una eternidad. ¿Cómo? No sé, pero vos hacete cuenta caso de eso. Ya se me casó a mí. Y no seas tan blandito, no te toques el corazón. No seas tan blandito. Si no, no puedes hacer el trabajo.
Wow. Yeah. So, you know, Honduras, at least, you know, 40 years ago, they never had the reputation for the kind of violent suppression that we saw in Salvador.
Yeah.
And in Guatemala.
Oh, yeah.
In fact, a guy I worked closely when I went there in '78. I was 23, and I was sent to work with or replace this other fellow. His name was Edward Guy, and Ed was in his mid 50s. He was a veteran of the Korean War, social worker. Ed was incredible. He outwalked the Hondurans. He would never, you know, he was one of these guys that really led by example. But anyway, he was once explaining the difference between Honduras, Salvador, and Guatemala to me. And he said, you know, in Honduras, if you get killed, it's usually because somebody got drunk and they made a mistake. He says, in Salvador, if they kill you, they got a reason. Maybe not be a good reason, but they got a reason. And he said, but in Guatemala, he says, they'll kill you for just standing there with teeth in your mouth.
Yep.
You know, so it was, you know, culturally very different. So hearing a Honduran talk like this is quite jarring, because that is really against, it's not common to Honduran culture, or the fact that they're not going to a place where we're going to, you know, and there was never, quote, influencia comunista. You know, there wasn't a communist influence in Honduran back in the day. You know, they flip-flopped between, you know, two parties, and with the army, you know, controlling everything behind the scenes. Mm-hmm. So the fact that they're going to gin up a leftist threat to justify killing people in order to keep them in line, and, you know, supporting the status quo, yeah, you know, it's pretty, that's revelatory about that sort of old style the stereotype we used to have of Latin America, but that's something that, at least I never saw that when I was doing the Honduran analysis. That wasn't typical back then.
And that video clip, Larry, I think you would agree is I think it's indicative of a deeper kind of how would I say it, structure of how the CIA used to do things. This strategy of tension, this kind of pinning a blame on one group versus another. We saw it in Italy in the years of lead, right? We saw pinning the blame on communist groups like Red Brigade and things like that. And then it was actually fascist groups. And then it created tension. And then there was a big election and votes switched because people were under the assumption that the communists were out there running around when they weren't. So,
yeah, well, let's substitute communists for Islamists. You know,
there you go.
So the same, I just became aware of a book. It was called Visas for Al-Qaeda. And it was written by the guy who was usually, I guess he was consul general. He was a consular officer in Saudi Arabia. And he talked about how the CIA would interfere to allow jihadists to get visas, including 15 of the 19 hijackers that came to the United States. So it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Just sort of a different ideological persuasion or motivation that can be used to create a threat, when in fact the CIA behind the scenes is the one helping create the threat.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they do have a target. Again, we're not going to go through all the recordings, but I highly encourage you guys to go. We'll put the link in the description. Their target here is this man named Marlon Ochoa. Marlon Ochoa is an electoral counselor, member of the Progressive Libre Party, and he exposed fraud in the Honduran elections. You guys can go through the recordings. Some of the titles, they tell you everything. Hernandez is searching for Marlon with U.S. intelligence contacts. Hernandez demands a trial for Marlon, no matter how much blood is spilled. Tomas to Hernandez, we are looking for the crime to capture Marlon internationally. So they're hunting that guy using the United States as well.
No, it's it's sort of, looking back now, it's a little quaint. Before we used to be just concerned about what they called the promotions. So within each military group, back then it was the fifth. You went from the fourth promotion, a group of colonels, then to the next batch of colonels, sort of the next generation. They were called the fifth promotion. And so they kept, they kept replacing each other. God knows now they got to be up to like the 38th promotion within the Honduran military by now. But yeah, this, at the root of it all is this enormous amount of money. Drug trafficking generates an enormous amount of money, and it does so with the collaboration, participation, support of U.S. financial institutions and U.S. corporations, U.S. companies.
Yep.
One of the advantages, if you will, for the free trade zone is what's called trade-based money laundering. So, if you're like narcotics traffickers, they get all their dollars up here in the United States. Okay, they can't just walk those dollars down to a bank and deposit them. They're making $25,000, $50,000, $100,000 deposits. That captures attention. So, and the cartels came up with a variety of methods to, launder the money. They would have different bank accounts opened by individuals from Colombia. They were actually got a vacation paid to come to Orlando to go to Disney World. But while they were there, and this was back in the 90s, they had to open 5 bank accounts, husband and wife each. So at the end, they'd go back with 10 bank accounts, and you get starter checks with each of those accounts, and they'd turn them over to the money broker. And then what would happen is every day, this took place in Orlando, here in Tampa, Sarasota, Fort Lauderdale, Miami, the Pitufos, the Smurfs. These are people who they work for the cartels. They get up every morning, go to a stash house. They take bags of cash, and they go around. They make deposits to each of these bank accounts. And they do it through like a night deposit, but they only do like $2,000, $4,000. They keep it below the $5,000 threshold. And so that would build up the money. But one of the other ways that the cartels repatriated is they would buy products they'd actually be able to pay a premium. So let's say normally like a case of Marlboro cigarettes would cost $300. Well, the cartels would pay $340 for it. Philip Morris was more than happy to make an extra $40 per case, particularly when you're selling 1,000 cases, 5,000 cases. Just do the math. The numbers add up quickly, and so that trade-based material gets transferred to wherever, Colombia, wherever, and then it's sold. And so the proceeds from that sale, that's how you transfer the money. That's one way to transfer the money. So the idea of setting up a free trade zone in Honduras makes sense from the standpoint you're going to use it as a money laundering center. It's like, what the hell is there to collect down there? Penguins?
I don't know.
I mean, you sell south from Punta del Este, or the south point of the Cape there. But good God, there's nothing there except Brazil. Okay, you got Carnival, you've got the nice thing between Brazil and Argentina, good competition for who has the best beef. But for in terms of U.S. military mission, not unless we're planning to fight the Brits. This is that boondoggle written all over it. Good Lord.
Right. Well, I think the whole entirety of Latin America is a boondoggle. So we're just going to keep hopping to the next mess.
Well, so in the 1980s, it was the one of the centers for the Cold War, because we were fighting communist subversion. We're fighting communist subversion in Nicaragua. We're fighting it in El Salvador, and we're fighting it in Guatemala. Ignore the fact that the reason you had insurgencies in Guatemala was because of the brutal treatment and the racist treatment by the Guatemalan army of the native population.
That's the indigenous Maya population.
Yeah, the Quetzal, Tzotzil, all the Mayan dialects that were there, and that's the only country I've been in Latin America, and I've been in almost all of them, where they literally treated the Indians as subhuman. They were treated like animals, that they were not, and it was virtue of dress. It wasn't by what their physical features. It's by if you dressed and spoke the native language, Tzotzil, Quetzal, then you were treated as if you weren't a human being, for starters. In Salvador, again, it was these rigid elite societies that it was economically class based. So the average Salvadoran, they're very poor. They didn't, they're tough to make money. What was fascinating is I knew Salvadorans who left Salvador, and they were considered quite poor. One went to Arlington, Virginia, and developed a cleaning business. Guy's a millionaire. So it was just like these people. You give them the right opportunity, put them in the right financial system where they can advance themselves, get educated, start a business, etc. And you didn't have that in Honduras and Salvador, and so this is where these uprisings took place. Then the elites tried to clamp down, and the United States invariably was tied in with the elites to suppress the people. But during the 80s, we were fighting the communists. That was it was Afghanistan was the number one, Central America was number two, Angola was number three. Those were like the three big areas of Cold War battle.
Well, let's hop over to Cuba, because there's a lot unfolding there, and I know you have to go shortly. But they captured Maduro in January and cut off Venezuelan oil. Now China is shipping rice because Cubans are starving. They indicted Raul Castro for 1996 something. It's unsealed on Cuban Independence Day, obviously deliberate. And Trump says he'll take over Cuba almost immediately. Yesterday, the Cuban foreign minister went on Fox News and called Rubio a liar. Said he's deliberately deceiving Americans. Are we just seeing the sort of Venezuela playbook again, the sort of blockade, indict?
Well, no, because in this case, despite, we took Maduro out, but Venezuela is still running itself. And it's it doesn't need the United States, and the United States is not in a position to control it. If we take out Castro and try to take over the government, that's one of those you break it, you buy it situations. And then at that point, we're going to be faced with an insurgency. The Cubans, they're not going to give up. They've got guns, ammunition, and mountains, the Sierra Madre Mountains. It will be Castro 2.0 coming back. And the notion that, indicting Raul Castro for doing what was allowed under international law to shoot down a plane. And I received some additional information. One of those hermanos, the brothers, they were flying an aircraft that had U.S. Air Force markings. And this was part of a deliberate, back then, CIA operation to provoke a Cuban reaction, to try to create a predicate. And I saw this myself, not so much against Cuba, but that's what was done against Panama in 1989, from middle of 1988 through 1989, because my branch, a girl named Alicia, she was the principal, she was the Panamanian analyst, and she was getting constantly briefed by the director of operations about all these different things that they were, provocations that were being carried out. So it's the same plan, is all I'm saying. It's, it's not like they come out with, we got a new idea here. No, they're using old school stuff.
What do you think, Chris? What do you think? What are your thoughts about Cuba?
I spent time in Cuba. I studied there. I've been there many, many times since 2015, the first time I went. It's changed a lot, of course, because of the impact of the maximalist sanctions. I mean, in that period at the end of Obama's presidency, it was the best place to be. There was money flowing. There was tourism. There was a new sense of hope in the island and in its relations with the U.S. And that all came crashing down with the first Trump presidency and sort of the turn for the worst in terms of relations, and the branding of Cuba as not only a state sponsor of terror, but part of the troika of tyranny, as John Bolton called Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua. So, yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy when you think about it. I think that from what I've heard from people, I just had my good friend Don Corder went down there, RT journalist, and he was down there just about a month and a half ago or so, and he said, look, it's difficult for the people, but it's not like they haven't experienced difficulties before. They're very resilient. But the question is, how long does that last? How long does that last? How long can the Cubans put up with it? He thinks that they will resist, and I agree, and Larry agrees as well. They will resist. I don't know if the entire population will resist, but certainly a good segment of the population.
But we thought that about Venezuela.
We thought, okay, so the difference about Venezuela is that Venezuela was a hybrid system that brought its power, that was brought into power through the ballot box, really. And Cuba was a popular revolution, as Larry pointed out, from the mountains, from a small boat to the mountains, and then took the whole country and changed it from the Batista dictatorship and brought a whole new reality for so many Cubans. So, and it's been one of the most important countries internationally for upholding anti-imperialism, for upholding dignity, for upholding sovereignty, for fighting for the rights of the oppressed in the global South. So they are very different in that sense, that Cuba has a revolution that has very deep roots versus Venezuela that was brought into power via the ballot box, but it tried to maintain a balance with the bourgeoisie and the capitalist class. Cuba got rid of them altogether, right? Now Cuba's talking about market socialism in the Chinese sense, but in the beginning and for 6 decades, it didn't have that.
Yeah.
And Larry, I know you have to get going, but before you do, what can you tell us about Bolivia? And then we'll go into detail after you leave for our viewers. But Bolivia is in chaos.
Yeah, well, I have never been to Bolivia. I've been up to the border, La Frontera, in Salta, Argentina. But no, I mean, the U.S. goes through cycles. We ignore, for about the last, up until the last few years, we've completely ignored Latin America. I mean, it used so back in the 80s, man, it was the top of the list.
Yep.
You know, and in the 70s, it was, you know, CIA was important with Argentina, Chile, you know, again, countering the communist influence. Then once we got to the 90s, once the collapse of the Soviet Union, we went, oh, who cares anymore? Just as long as the money keeps flowing. And that's, you know, that's where you know, the drug money's played a significant factor. And with U.S. corporations profiting off of it, you know, don't rock the boat.
Don't rock the boat. The words of wisdom from Larry the Shirt Johnson.
Yeah, there you go.
Larry, thank you so much for taking the time. I know you're just got off of holiday and you're probably catching up on all these interviews and hot racking it. So thank you so much for making the time.
Hey, I'm always happy to chat with you.
Now you can go find out more about Honduras Gate. You're probably your mind's gonna be blown. It's worse than what I could convey on the show.
Then Chris has nabbed me for later this week as well. So
that's right. That's right. Tomorrow I'll see you.
Perfect. Okay.
Mañana. Okay.
We'll see you soon.